Hey guys, Jari5 here, and today, like I said yesterday, we are tackling Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th series of horror films. Ironically, this year, 2017, October does have a Friday the 13th, so I can imagine that all the TV stations are going to be playing the Friday the 13th movies nonstop. But, as I mentioned in the last video, I've never seen a Friday the 13th movie. In fact, I don't know why, from yesterday to today, I didn't bother, watching at least one of them. I know that probably watching the first one wouldn't have been, much... It wouldn't have given me much material to work with in terms of talking about the character, because... from what I understand, the villain in the first Friday the 13th movie is Mrs. Voorhees, Jason's mother. And then from the second one onwards, I believe it's Jason. And I don't know. I've never really had much interest in watching those movies, but I do have to say that I think the concept of what Jason is very interesting. He is, I think, an emotionally driven character, at least from what I understand, because of the ties with his mother and because the fact that he almost drowned, or he did drown, something like that. I don't really 100% remember the backstory. The fact that he's a silent killer, stuff like that. I think that makes him very intimidating, especially with the featureless mask. The only features that he has on his mask are a nose somewhat, and the eyes, those cold-blooded eyes that are always staring at you. And I think that makes his design very iconic and very creepy. How many people, when you see a hockey mask, you just think, oh, that's Jason. I know I have. At least growing up, there were some hockey masks I'd see, and that's what I'd think of immediately. In terms of drawing this piece, it was a challenge, because I'm drawing a much smaller portrait than last time. Last time it was really in your face, really close up of Freddy, and this time I'm drawing not too close up of Jason. And again, I tried to not use a lot of guidelines so that it would look, yes, sketchy, but still not to the point where you could tell I used guidelines. And when it came to the shading, it was also a challenge, because I didn't know if shading was gonna mess up the piece or not. But in the end, I can say that I did like the way it came out. I was really afraid, because I made the head way too big compared to the body, and extending the body was gonna be really hard for me without having to digitally edit or modify anything. Again, I'm doing this with no Control Z whatsoever, and this time around, I was very I was very truthful to that. I think I only did it once, and again, it was because my tablet glitched out and did a line that it wasn't supposed to. And he looks like an egghead in his head. My sister even said that he looked like a bobblehead, and I had to agree, he really did. But I think with what I managed to do, he looked at least somewhat normal. I still do think his head is too big for his body, but ultimately I did like how it came out, because, again, I'm not really used to drawing realism. I like it. I like, the feeling of, oh, I pulled it off, sweet. And I've done realism before, but I hate doing it because, well, I don't hate it, but I don't really like doing realism because of how complicated it is, and how easily you can know, okay, this is wrong because the proportions are wrong. Nobody's head would look like that. Realistically, this can't happen. These shadows are wrong. But I try to do the best with the reference I had. I'm using a render from Mortal Kombat X, which Jason was a part of, which was really, really weird. But it's the funny thing is, Freddy was also a part of the Mortal Kombat series at one point, so I think that's a really cool thing. Predator, an Alien. I don't know why we didn't decide to include those, even though they're... Well, Predator, I think, is more so does that count as a horror movie, or is that more of an action movie? I know Aliens is more of a horror movie. I don't know why we didn't decide to include one of the xenomorphs from that film in this list, but Again, when it came to the shading, a lot of blacks, a lot of, despite the fact that the mask is white, it's very dirty, and I try to give it that grayish, almost white look with the shading I gave it. As I mentioned before, the only Friday the 13th movie I've watched, quote unquote, heavy air quotes, is Jason X. And again, I never watched the movie completely. I watched little bits and pieces of it, and I think even by humor standards, the movie's pretty bad. Again, I didn't watch the whole thing, so I wouldn't really exactly know. But I do remember this scene where they're like, because I think the whole thing is that they're on a spaceship, right? I think that's the whole gist of the film, that that the teenagers and token, characters are on a spaceship for whatever reason, and Jason's chasing them. I would love to read a synopsis of that film. In fact, I think I'm going to, after I'm done recording this, I'm going to read a synopsis on the film and then just find out what it is exactly they're doing on the spaceship. And I distinctly remember this one scene where, I think one of the guys goes into one of the rooms, and the room disguises itself, and he's on this beach setting, I think, with naked women or almost naked women, something like that. And then Jason walks in and he sees the women. I think they cut to something else, and then when they cut back, Jason's just beating the shit out of this dude, stuffed in a bag or something like that. I don't remember, but to me it was humorous, but at the same time I was like, come on. This is the most silly thing that you could have this character do, and I'm sure that there's probably sillier things, but I guess now that we're talking about Jason, we can talk about Freddy vs. Jason, which I guess again, I've technically seen that movie. I haven't seen it beginning to end. I haven't seen it, I've only seen chunks of it. I remember a while back, it was a few years ago, I actually watched the Freddy vs. Jason part, and I remember thinking to myself, really? This is it? This is the whole Freddy vs. Jason experience? Because the rest of the movie is heavily focused around the teenagers, as most horror movies are, but there wasn't much Freddy versus Jason. There was moments with Freddy, moments with Jason, and then the final climax is a half an hour long, if that, and in the end Jason kind of wins. Yes, technically Freddy doesn't die, and ultimately they do kind of sort of come together at the end. It's implying that Jason sort of rescues Freddy's head at least, or whatever, or he comes victorious. I don't even remember what it's supposed to imply. He comes out with his head out of the lake, and then Freddy winks at us oh, I'm not really dead, ha. It's I don't know, it really felt like a more ambiguous ending where it's they're both dead but they're both not dead would have service the film a little better, even though that is kind of the cop-out of so many movies. It's versus whatever. It's well, we all know what's going to happen. Neither of them is going to win. They're going to team up or whatever. Seen it a million times. It's going to keep happening because, you can't, in these kinds of cases, you can't pick sides. It's a hypothetical, which is a fun idea to play with, but it never ends in anything. And if you do end up doing a death battle, someone's always going to be offended by it. Well, maybe not offended, I think is probably the wrong word, but someone's going to be dissatisfied with it. It's going to be no, you're wrong, because obviously Freddy, because he has nightmare powers. It's no, Jason, because he's immortal, or whatever his shtick is, and he's scarier, or whatever. Which do I find scarier, honestly? I think, well, because Jason's just a human, right? That's all he is. He's just a really strong human, and I that in itself is kind of creepy, but I think overall Freddy is a little scarier for me. He's creepier by his appearance, his abilities, whereas Jason's just it feels like a god-modded character. Again, maybe I need to see the movies, understand the lore a little bit more. Maybe there is something more magical to it. His signature weapon is a machete, which I think is really cool. And I think one of the plot points is that you can only kill him with his own weapon, right? Which I think, again, is a really interesting concept. It's oh, you're killing him with his own weapon. That's it can make for some clever plot points. You can't just kill him with everything like any other movie monster. It's like it needs to be specifically with the weapon he bears. You need to unarm him and then grab his weapon and stab him with it. That's cool. I do like that. But a lot of what I'm talking about might be wrong. Again, I'm not entirely sure. But not the point. He is incredibly iconic, and I think that might be for a reason. One of the things that I have been noticing as I've been doing this, and as I analyze horror movies a little bit more as the years go by, is that I don't quite understand what makes a lot of these characters so iconic, because they have very little roles in their movies, and we'll get to that in a few days. But a lot of the characters that are iconic aren't really that. They don't have a huge presence in their first film. Like Freddy, he's in the movie and whatever, but he's not really that much in it. Like, yeah, he's the villain, but we don't really see too much of him. And a lot of characters that I'm going to be drawing fit that role of characters that, have presence, I guess, but they're not really too there until like sequels where they start abusing their on-screen presence more and more. And in a way, I do kind of like that more, because it's like, well, we're here to see the character. We're not here to really see the story, or, the heroes, so to speak, quote unquote. We're here to see the villains. We're here to see the bad guys. We're here to see Freddy. We're here to see Jason. Other characters. We're here to see the things that scare us, not the ones that are being scared, because there's no point in it. But I ended up really, really, really liking this piece. How it came out. I was unsure that I was going to, because I thought I was absolutely going to despise how it was going to turn out, but this is the final product. I actually kind of like how it looks. Like, proportionate wise, it's not perfect. It's far from it. I still do think the head is too big for the body, but for what it is, I ended up really liking it, because it allowed me to really work with shading and contrast. What can I do with just the one pen tool? Shading, which you would think is really hard to do with ink, but it's like, this is what it would look like if I used a regular old pen that anyone uses. This is probably what I'd be able to do. And the fact that it's digital has nothing to do with it. I couldn't erase anything. I couldn't undo any of my mistakes. I couldn't edit it at all with like the marquee tool or the selection tool or whatever. And this is what we got. So join me tomorrow as we draw Pazuzu Regan from The Exorcist, probably one of the most pants-shittingly scariest movies of all time. Not in my personal opinion, but historically, I think we'll talk to it. We'll talk about that tomorrow. I honestly am really looking forward to drawing Regan. But until next time, guys, stay safe and stay awesome. This is Char 5 signing off.